Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Good morning and welcome to the next episode of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to welcome onto the show Chris Kirby from Tomorrow's Journey. Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, morning. Thank you.
Chris, delighted to have you on. Our very good friend, a mutual connection, Matt Lawley from Barclays Bank has kindly made this introduction. So Matt, when you're listening to this, thank you very much. Chris, as is customary, before we get into sort of the main bulk of the interview, I'd like to quickly just go through education and career, just to give people a sense of sort of the journey that you've been on over the last sort of decade or two to get to where you are with Tomorrow's Journey. So is that okay if I just quickly run through that? So education-wise, got a management and finance qualification from the London School of Business and Finance. And then your career has pretty much been working within the sort of motor industry, working for Ford Motor Company, Jaguar and Land Rover, had and have worked within sort of marketing business called We Create Clarity, Auto Futura, which is sort of a present role, and also now the co-founder and CEO of Tomorrow's Journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those that aren't aware of or haven't heard yet of Tomorrow's Journey, sort of what is it? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, Tomorrow's Journey is a neutral fleet network. And what we mean by that is we take underutilised vehicles from fleet owners. So that could be leasing companies or rental companies, councils, large fleet operators. And we make those available to companies who have consumer demand for transportation. Right. And again, what we mean by that would be, Zipcar, Uber drivers, so people within kind of the more flexible mobility space, allowing them to kind of extend their fleet network and actually get better utilisation for vehicle assets. We know that vehicles in general, particularly cars, are massively underutilised. So cars are parked for 90% of the time. Can't quite from the room we're in here, but usually I can point to a car park outside the window and say, look at all these cars that are parked, they're not being used. So our thing is saying, if we can help cars be better utilised, vehicles be better utilised, then actually there can be less cars on the road, services can be more efficient and actually bring better value to customers. We're going to be, we're not a B2C brand. It's unlikely that, consumers of these services will ever know that we're there, but actually we just want to make those services better and available to more people.
Okay, and so when did you launch the company and when did it go live?
So the company's a year old in terms of when we actually founded it. Sure. Just over a couple of weeks over a year old. But really, we've only been working full time on the project since April. So there was a period of time of kind of working on our value proposition, understanding is this the right time in the market, talking to market people, starting to build a case for investment, all of that kind of stuff. It's sort of been 6-7 months that we've been on the project full time. We've got our MVP system is built. We're looking at some pilots which will start in January time, which is really good. We're about to go through another round of investment now, which will kind of start to accelerate what we're doing into next year.
Okay, and your role is CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the co-founders. My fellow co-founder, Nick, and myself, Nick James, Nick and I used to work together. Nick and I kind of sat down and we came up with this actually probably over a year ago now, where we were sitting there going, oh, there's something missing in this market. What is it? Okay, well, we think it's this thing, and we wrapped it up in Tomorrow's Journey. But yeah, I guess my role is kind of that central figure. So I work on business development, but also helping to shape what the product is. And I guess, you referred a bit to my auto background. Pretty much since I was 18, worked in the automotive industry in one way, shape or form. So I guess that knowledge helps me to piece some of the bits together.
Sure. And so what is the product? So you've explained potentially what you're doing, what the business is going to do, but how's it actually going to work in reality?
Yeah, so the product is a software product. It's going to be less cool than a really funky app. It's a desktop platform that looks very good and is very easy to use, but essentially it's things that go on behind the scenes. So it's about how we match the underutilized vehicles, how we understand when they're available, how they're available, what price they're available at, how long they're available for, and then how we make those available through to the companies who need them. So it's kind of the background piece. It's a very complex kind of architected system in the background. So essentially it's a software thing. From a business perspective, we just take a percentage of the revenue we create for the asset owners. So there's no real cost for putting vehicles onto the platform. There's no real cost for using it. If we can make a vehicle better utilized, then we just have a bit of a cut of the utilization we create. Sure. If we don't, then we're not doing our jobs properly. So.
Okay, and so presumably that's been, so the solution and the platform's been designed in-house, so that's presumably one of the other co-founders has put that together.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, who's our CTO, again, Matt and I have worked together for quite a long time. Incredible developer, but also technical architect. He's the line I always use with investing. He did navigation software for nuclear submarines. So Matt's a smart bloke and knows his stuff about these things. So kind of it's been mine and Nick's vision from a market perspective, and Matt's kind of translated that into a technical one. And we've had some help from other people in terms of actually kind of building the system out, because it's very big, but it's been led by Matt. So yeah, absolutely all developed in-house within our team.
And how did you guys all meet? How do you know each other?
Yeah, so kind of through, kind of that collective, really, I guess, in that we worked together on a number of projects for VW and Mercedes in my role at Clarity. Matt was a freelance developer that we were using, but probably used pretty much non-stop for the space of 2 years on a couple of big projects. And Nick was working for me. He was my account director in that, so he was looking after one of my major clients. So. Sure. We kind of all met around that area, and so as this started to come together, we looked at the people that we wanted to have on the team, so particularly with Matt, we kind of brought him a little later, but he was the first and pretty much the only choice we had for CTO. And thankfully he was keen to get on board. So
from doing the tech work on nuclear submarines to this, I mean, clearly he's clearly a knowledgeable chap. So definitely. And what was it like opening a company? Presumably this is the first business you've opened, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been an interesting experience, bit of a learning curve. I guess a lot of the roles I've done before have been commercially based, so I kind of understand the workings of a business and kind of how you get it together, and particularly things like how you craft a proposition and how you take a product to market. We've done that a number of times for a number of different companies, either in my previous role or actually even before that, working in-house at some of the bigger corporates. So that kind of felt a bit more natural, but there are a lot of things around the fundraising and how you sell. We were talking earlier about the accounts, how you put the accounts together. Well, I kind of understand how that works, but not practically. Sure. So been some of that's been a bit of a learning curve, but I think it's a thing that I've always been keen to do, even though I probably didn't always know it. I think this is kind of always what I wanted to do, to have my own thing and something that you can grow and develop, and ultimately it's on your shoulders whether it's successful or not, and actually that's a good thing.
Yeah, and obviously 15 years in industry, sort of it's led to this, hasn't it? I guess you've learned a lot, made some mistakes along the way presumably, and it's sort of culminated in this. this, and you've met some good guys and now fellow business partners along the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what had driven it really. I guess there was a lot of good stuff that we had done in the corporate environment in different projects. And actually, you mentioned Auto Futura before, a company I work closely with still today. But we developed some stuff with them 10 years ago for Fiat that is still a big part of what they do now. And that was a thing kind of we did off our own back. So I've always been a thing that I've enjoyed taking a challenge on. But this is by far the biggest one, I guess. So,
Good, an exciting one.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on obviously breaching your year anniversary and onwards and upwards.
Absolutely.
Something I'm really keen to understand, just my inquisitive nature, is sort of why does Tomorrow's Journey exist? Why is there a sort of gap in the market for what you're doing from what you've just explained as in what the solution is? I'm surprised nothing like this already exists. So why doesn't it exist? And presumably there's a market there that is just ripe for being very successful in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a number of companies doing things kind of around the periphery of what we're doing. So there are some companies that do this kind of in a rental environment. There's some companies that take underutilized vehicles but put them directly to consumers. So this kind of thing is happening in and around, but I don't think anyone's taken the approach that we have. I think the rationale behind what we're doing is that we really believe that more flexible mobility or flexible vehicle access is kind of where the future lies from an industry point of view. Customers don't want to be tied into vehicles for 2, 3, 4, 5 years anymore. They want to be more flexible about how they use it. Actually, some customers want to give up cars and take a more flexible solution. So we believe that that's the future in the medium term as we move towards electric and autonomous vehicles. But we don't believe that can be done in the current framework. So individual companies operating individual fleets to offer these services can only do them in the most densely populated areas, because if they're one of 5 fleets all offering the same service in London, for example, you can't get a utilisation high enough to be able to expand beyond the most densely populated areas. So what we're doing is saying, well, actually, they don't have to all compete with their own fleets. We can provide a fleet that is more flexible to them. So definitely the driver for us is about having really growing that mobility service and making it available to more people.
And what do you think the biggest challenge for you guys is?
I think probably for us, in fact, certainly for us, the challenge is going to be getting the first bit going from a pilot perspective. We've got some pilots in train kind of for January time, which is exciting. But I think for us, the model works best at scale. So clearly a neutral network, a neutral marketplace exists the more vehicles that are on it. And I think for us, getting from 0 to say 600 vehicles is going to be the hardest thing. Getting from 600 to 6,000 and 6,000 to 600,000 will be easy or easier. I think getting to 600 will be the hardest bit. So the next 12 months of going, right, let's get the technology in, let's figure out all of the things that doesn't work in practice that we have to work out, and then actually put into practice a scale of kind of rolling it out and how that comes together. So definitely the first 600 vehicles I think is our biggest challenge.
And part of that journey will be fundraising, capital, and so certainly for listeners who haven't been through that process yet, but with their company potentially exploring it, what's it been like? What advice could you sort of pass back to those? I think it's definitely been the most interesting area for me, because it's something that I've never really been anywhere near before. So it's been a real learning curve each step of the way. And really that was kind of the first part of our journey, really. And you mentioned Matt from Barclays earlier. I met Matt at the first kind of investor event that I went to, just to go and have a look around and see what it was. Great.
So that's kind of where that connection comes from. So there's been a real learning curve for us. We've had some good advice along the way. I think what I would say about investment is that if you have a strong business proposition, actually funding's not that difficult to get. I think there's lots of different places to get it from, so picking the right one for your business. So if you're a high growth potential tech business like us, our if we got to 600,000 vehicles on our fleet, our valuation is massive. So that's high growth. So venture capital firms are interested in talking to us when we get to the right stage, which is about now. But actually, if you're a smaller technology business building a piece of hardware that kind of is a smaller scale, then actually talking to a bank or angel investor and that type of thing is more appropriate. I think the first thing is about establishing a clear value proposition. And that goes back to my marketing roots. It's amazing how many companies you meet who say, yeah, right, so I'm going to go out to investment, and you go, okay, cool, what's your business model? Well, we're not sure yet, but once we've got the money, we'll work it out. Okay, you need to be really clear about what you're doing, and I think we've known, not quite since day one, but certainly since we went and talked to people, what our value proposition is, why we're doing what we're doing, what is it we're doing, how we're going to make money. We've known all those things, and that's not changed. What the roadmap's going to be, what we do first, how we move, that changes on a daily basis. But the bit that runs through the middle is pretty key. So I would say, be clear on what those key things are for you, and then look at what the right option is. And then once you know what that is, engage the right people, and the money is there if you've got something that's strong enough for you.
And we're recording this podcast in the Innovation Centre on Silverstone Park. But at the moment, Tomorrow's Journey, your team, you're not part of sort of Silverstone business region quite yet, and not part of the Silverstone technology cluster. What's your sort of thoughts and opinion on that moving forward?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing for us. I think we've been quite recently introduced to the guys here and kind of what they're trying to do, or what they are doing here, and it's quite exciting to us. It's definitely something we want to be a part of going forward. We mentioned earlier, it's definitely a thing on our list of things to do, to join, because I think for us it's about what the network that's trying to grow here is definitely the thing that we're trying to promote within the mobility space, and this kind of new automotive market that's growing, which is one of collaboration. It's one about working together, not because there's something in it for you, but because it's something in it generally for the industry, for growth, generally for good. So it's about making an introduction or taking a meeting or giving some advice or whatever, trying to do that as much as possible, and also then not being afraid to ask the other way when you need some help for things. And it seems to be a thing that certainly here that they're really keen to promote, and for us that's it fits really well with what we're trying to do.
I would totally endorse that. I think you should definitely join. I think from our experience, Longhurst, my firm is a member firm here, and I attend a lot of the special interest groups that they run, the networking events they run, seminars. Attended the Advanced Engineering show in Birmingham, just to be with sort of fellow members, and the connections that you can make and the friendships that sort of grow from there, certainly from a collaborative perspective, as you said, is immense. So would certainly endorse that. I've seen on LinkedIn, because obviously we follow each other on LinkedIn, that you guys have also just started a podcast of sorts. So talk to us about that, so our listeners might want to follow that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a couple of guys who, again, it's back to that thing, people you've been introduced to, your network within your industry, become good friends, meet for coffees and beer and talk about the industry and where it's going and what it's doing. And we kind of thought, actually, we've got some interesting opinions on this. And I think that it would be interesting for people to, particularly within our industry, to hear. So we thought a podcast would be a good way to go. Definitely we want to use it as a platform to engage other people as well. Because we were interested in other people's opinions. Particularly the automotive mobility transport space is so fast moving. There's so many things that are happening on a daily, weekly basis, and a lot of it changes kind of where I think the route potentially for me is pretty clear about where it's going to end up, but how it's going to get there is really changing on a daily basis. So it's really good to discuss that, but also good to get different people's opinions. There's definitely a lot of stuff around the local authorities and how they get involved, and discussing that I think is really super interesting as well. So it's just a thing we started, and we thought, well, we may as well just record these discussions we're having because we think they're interesting. And it seemed to get some good feedback, so we did a few more, and we've invited a couple of other people into what we're doing as well, and hope to do some more. And I think we want to spin that off into some networking groups and meetups and other things, which again, all time permitting, we'll try and do. Because it's back to that thing, I think it's just good to collaborate. It's good to hear other people's thoughts. It's good to meet interesting people. It's good to, pretty much every podcast that we've done, I've come out of it going, I didn't think of that. And actually, it gives you another thing to look at. And even though it's guys that you know really well, when you get in and you start talking about, I mentioned local authorities, that was one in the first podcast we did, thinking, oh yeah, okay, actually, I hadn't really considered that. How do you engage when you land in a city as a startup and you want to deploy a service? How do you engage the local authorities? How do they work with these things? How on earth do they manage fast-moving technology? When if they conduct a 6-month review of do we implement bike share, by the time they finish, no one's doing bike share anymore and everyone's got electric scooters. Like how do you handle that? So those type of discussions are super interesting, and we want to get other people's opinions and other people's thoughts on lots of these other areas.
And who else co-hosts it with you?
So there's a guy called Ben Boucher West. Ben works for a company called Appy Parking, a really cool business looking at kind of how parking is going to move in this mobility space. They're actually part of the Transport Systems Catapult in Milton Keynes.
I saw their team present a month or two ago. Very good.
So super guys, really interesting guys. Ben's ex-Bosch, which actually is where I met him. So Bosch in their mobility team, but he's recently joined Appy. And then also Luke Rust, who works for Immense Simulations, and again I think they've been involved with the Silverstone Technology Cluster based in Milton Keynes. Luke's a good friend of mine, going back quite a long way. We actually played rugby together quite a few years ago. So the three of us do it, but actually we've had other people come in and talk, and other people host it. And the idea is that there's kind of 4 or 5 of us that get involved. That it doesn't need to find a date where we're all available. We can just do something, 1-to-1. 2-to-1, 2-to-2,
whatever, however it works.
So if we've got an interesting topic, an interesting person, but probably our biggest drawback at the minute is just the time between us all to get it together. We wish we could be doing more.
Well, I've asked Luke to come on this podcast. I met Luke a week or two ago at a STC event, and so he's kindly said he'll come on. Which is good. But he was endorsed by another chap there. Said, look, you need to get this guy on. So
cool.
Look forward to that. You mentioned a few minutes ago whilst you were talking that. The journey to get to the end point is clearly going to have twists and turns, but you can visualise what that end point will be. What is that from a mobility perspective?
So I think there's a really interesting thing about time here, but the end point for me is one of kind of shared electric autonomous vehicles. A lot of talk about autonomous vehicles, actually a lot in the consumer world now as well, on general news and in general publications, but certainly in the industry, autonomous vehicles are progressing quickly. There's a lot of question marks about how quickly they can come in mass. How much is kind of it works fine in this city in certain environments, but actually how well is it going to scale? And there's a real naysayer view and a real positive view, and I think I sit probably close to the positive view in terms of timings. I mentioned local authorities earlier. That'll be a key part of it. How are you going to land 10,000 autonomous vehicles in London and make that work practically? Is another question. But also I think there's a kind of road to that, because clearly we're not going to 1st of January 2030 someone says, all right, all the vehicles are autonomous now. No, that's clearly not going to happen. So there's going to be a journey towards that, and I think what it effectively is going to become people having less ownership of vehicles, less fixed ownership, moving to more flexible solutions, which has been happening over time anyway, with people moving to kind of more like leasing and personal contract hire type products. But for me, I think it will become a subscription service. Almost think of a mobile phone. If you're a heavy user of a vehicle, you'll have a more expensive subscription that will get you more access to a vehicle. Maybe that gives you a permanent vehicle, but then one that you can swap out for different types of vehicles at different times. If you're a really casual user of a vehicle, you may have effectively like a pay-as-you-go subscription, and there'll be something in between. And that will start to include a lot of the other different models. So a zip car, pay by the hour use, through to a say permanent vehicle on your drive that you can switch out. And that's kind of the thing really behind tomorrow's journey as well, is that we think that can only happen effectively if the vehicles live in a kind of big network together. You can only take your vehicle that's on subscription and swap it for a vehicle, for a van for the weekend, while your vehicle goes into the pool and is used by Zipcar customers. That can only really happen if there's a flexible network to move kind of between things. So I think we would see it moving to a subscription service, and then that subscription service almost becoming partly and then fully autonomous. So again, based on your use.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think, as you said, putting 10,000 cars in a local authority. I think that the other challenge is going to be, what do you do with all the current vehicles, combustion engine vehicles?
Yeah.
That there are, what was it, 50, 60 million on UK roads at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's the number. Something silly, and I'm sure it's probably higher than that. And so I think there's even a bigger sort of environmental conversation to be had about developing all this technology, which is clearly and sounds exciting and phenomenal. But what do we do with our current cars out in the car park?
Yeah, and how's it going to translate to that as well? Because I think, again, it's fine, I think, to say, in 15 years' time, no new cars are going to be registered, but people will be driving old cars and the rest will be autonomous. But again, there's whole knock-on implications to that.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to people who sell the cars? What's going to happen to used car garages? What happens to small garages in your local village? How do these things kind of all fit together? And those are a lot of the unanswered questions and things that change on a more daily basis, I guess. So I say I think that end point is fixed, although you could kind of move it up and down a timeline depending on a bit of technology and a bit of government.
Yeah, the bit those businesses will need to pivot and evolve. We had Tristan Allen from Room 44 on episode 2, I think, and so he was saying the same thing. People that are currently producing exhausts, as an example, or other pieces for a combustion engine. In several years' time, potentially they're going to be sort of, not required anymore. So how are they evolving as a business, and how are they going to sort of grow and expand and move into, the world that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it's not the first time that's happened. So a lot of people, again, particularly more established industry people, will go, but it will never happen because of those things. Well, it will happen because consumers will want it.
Sure.
Whether they want it now because it's not quite here, but they're going to want it. When you can say, I don't have to have a car anymore, and I'll press a button and an autonomous pod turns up outside my house and takes me somewhere for £2. Why on earth would you have a car in that scenario? So the customer is king ultimately, and whether you go, poor old guy who makes the exhaust, well, he'll just still make exhaust. Well, he won't, because there won't be any cars to put them on, because no one's going to buy them. So there needs to be a bit of that, and that's not the first time, say, in history things have happened and people have to pivot and change. Let's say sometimes the naysayers just go, well, it just can't possibly happen. What's Fred going to do down the road? What's that dealership going to do? Well, they'll change. They'll find something else to do, and I think that's going to be the interesting part. I think there's also a big argument that says that autonomous vehicles may find their way into a more developing economy rather than a more established one, because it's particularly look at the UK and the US, it's really difficult to unravel some of this stuff, whereas actually if you whacked it into I was going to say parts of India, their road network's a nightmare, but no, if you put it into a kind of a growing or newer market where they don't have all this kind of established legacy stuff, actually maybe that becomes practically somewhere like Singapore or Hong Kong, more closed environments. So you may find that those are quicker. I definitely think that there's kids at school now who will never learn to drive because they won't have to.
Absolutely.
Certainly in certain parts of the country, any kind of city, I think Milton Keynes size and above, if you live in the middle of that city and you kind of don't really intend to go too much further out of that, you may, kids that are 5, 6, 7-year-olds may never need to learn to drive. So I think that's going to be a big thing. I certainly think within 10 years we all would have been in or have had an opportunity to go in an autonomous vehicle. So again, even if only in central London on some closed roads, Uber are operating autonomous vehicles, I think that's going to definitely be a thing. But how well and quickly that expands out across the country is a big question.
We'll find out.
Well, we will indeed, yeah.
Very, very exciting. And so thank you. That's a lot of information and fantastic insight. So thank you for that. And we're sort of 25 minutes into the interview. So what we'll do, we'll move on to a little bit about you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course,
what was sort of your genesis for getting into, sort of motor vehicles? What was there a genesis?
I guess people ask me that. I guess being a typical boy of my generation, I liked cars, but it wasn't a thing that I went, I really want to work in the car industry. And actually I really liked planes more than I liked cars.
Okay.
So it wasn't really a thing with that. I left school, I went to find a job, I ended up working in a call centre for Rover, of all companies. That's how old I am. But making appointments for dealers with local businesses. It was a real simple job, and I was kind of all right at it, and it was fine. And that got me into working into a Ford dealer, which then let me work for Ford directly. And then all of a sudden I went, okay, this is an industry that I know and I feel comfortable with. And the career kind of progressed from there. And I was quite lucky that I got to work in different areas of the market and experience different things. And I think because I was always relatively forward thinking, I got given projects, things that, my last role at Fiat before I left to join Clarity was once described as, that's all the things that no one else wants to do.
Right.
Which is good. I had a team of like 15 people or whatever, and we had everything from setting up Maserati Financial Services to doing Fiat trucks in the broker leasing market. Like, it was a real varied thing. But I think having that approach really gave me a good rounded view on the market.
Huge.
Helped me think a bit more laterally about stuff. And then particularly working at Clarity for 3 years, getting challenged by big automotive clients about what's happening here, how do we do this, how do we engage customers in this area. That was a really good point. So that kind of led us to this bit, really. I mean, that's kind of how Tomorrow's Journey was born, but also I guess from a career point of view, I don't think if you'd asked me 10 years ago when I was 25, what would you be running your own tech business in 10 years' time? I'd have probably said, oh no, God, I really don't want to do that. But I think ultimately, if I look back, probably even then, I was frustrated by corporate people telling me what to do when I was going, I can do this over here and it'd be really great. And they go, but no, do this instead.
Holding you back.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe, holding me back or stopping me from falling over, one of the two. But this is way more fun.
But sometimes you need to fall over, right?
Yeah,
to stand back up and become stronger and learn.
Yeah.
So. And you're a local guy, so you sort of live in Milton Keynes, you've lived in Toaster, so you played rugby for
Toaster, for 14 years, first team rugby. Retired at the end of last year. So getting a bit much with work and also getting old.
Okay.
So I consider myself a local guy. I definitely lived in and around Milton Keynes. I lived in Buckingham for a bit and Toaster, but in MK. So it's good. And it's a good innovation and kind of hub, particularly for our industry, but just generally for innovation. So it's a good place for us to be, and it's where we want Tomorrow's Journey to be based. And whilst we might have to have a footprint in London at some point, we don't want to get sucked into the classic startup, let's go and get an office in Shoreditch type approach.
I know a few of those. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, the beauty of Silverstone is Silverstone Park's got, I think, sort of circa 4,500 businesses within an hour's drive. So that clearly covers the likes of Milton Keynes and what have you. And so you're absolutely right. I think for a young startup company in the tech space, this is without a doubt the place to be. And if you're looking to collaborate and looking for other businesses to help your business grow, or very unique specialist individuals who are just incredibly talented to come in, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So great. Cool. So we're going to come to the sort of end of the interview. So first of all, thanks again for coming on. I think it's been awesome, and really looking forward to seeing what happens, certainly over the next 12, 18 months. Definitely want to get you back on to see how sort of fundraising piece sort of concluded and how you've sort of then sort of launched from there, and how those sort of trials are going, as you've said, start in January. So 2 or 3 last questions. Sort of a fun one, if we can make it a fun one, is about just mistakes. And so I will always ask everyone that comes on, has there been ever any sort of professional mistake that you've made, something that's sort of embarrassing or cringy or just a bit stupid that you'd be prepared to share, so that we could encourage others out there to say, look, if you make mistakes, it is what it is. So sort of pull your socks up and get on with it. So is there anything that throughout Chris Kirby's career within this space that he's made that we could share with people?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's been many, and too many to mention, I should think, but definitely the one that always springs to mind, actually really early on in my career. So I was working for the Ford dealership in Milton Keynes, but looking after like small business sales. And I've been doing it for a while, and I'd been working on a deal for quite a long time for 300 cars. So it's quite a big deal, my kind of my first big deal. And I was in there actually with a colleague of mine from the leasing company, who actually ended up being a very good friend of mine, but at the time I didn't really know very well. And we just concluded the meeting. The guy had kind of signed off the 2-year deal. I was very pleased. And as we were walking out, and bearing in mind I've been to this office a few times before, I got to the door to reception, pulled the handle, and it didn't open. So I thought, it must be a security thing. So I pressed the button next to the door, switched all the lights off in the whole office, 200 people behind me.
Oh my God.
And it was, this time of year, so it was dark outside. So everyone's gone, oh, what's going on?
Everyone's sitting there in pitch black.
Yeah, so I switched the light back on, and the guy just went, no, you just push it. And I was like, oh God, okay, fine. Ran out with the order form before he could take it off me. And the guy, Mike Brook, and I'll get Brookers to listen into this as well. But so we ended up being really good mates. But after he didn't really know very well, so he said he kind of just shook my hand and went off, and he said it took him like 20 minutes in the car to stop laughing before he could drive home.
That's hysterical.
So yeah, a way to celebrate doing a first deal. But it was fine when we sold him those cars. So it was
well, congratulations on the deal.
It's good,
and a great story. Thank you.
That's all right.
Is there anything, before we get on to the last question, is there anything that I haven't asked you that whilst I've got you on that you want to sort of talk about or mention?
Yeah, I think, well, the bit for me, and actually we have already talked about it, but when I was looking through the notes and stuff for today and thinking, oh, what's the question? The thing is that always gets asked is about the time for autonomous vehicles. That's our like big industry question. But we kind of have talked about that a bit. But I think, for me to put a timescale on it, I think 15 years.
Okay.
Because I didn't really do that. I avoided the question earlier. But yeah, that's kind of our big industry one that gets asked to most people on most panels. So that's what I was going to throw out.
15 years.
15 years.
Okay, so I'm making a note of that.
Yeah.
I'll remind you of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if tomorrow's journey goes well in 15 years, I won't be here. I'll be on holiday somewhere. But
good.
We'll see.
Well earned, no doubt.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
I always ask this question. As I said, super selfish because I'm the podcast host. So, what bit of advice could you give me? So, Chris Broome, owner of Longhurst, bit of life advice, perhaps something that you've experienced throughout your career, something profound, maybe something inspirational.
Yeah.
What could Chris Kirby give me as a piece of advice?
I think for me this is an interesting one, and again, probably. I think when I say it, it's going to sound really obvious, but I'll give a bit of context as to kind of why more recently I feel quite strongly about it. And I think it's a thing about always trying to remain positive in the stuff that you do. So even when something you think at the time is a bad thing, if you keep positive and you keep doing the things that you're doing, ultimately good things come out of it, and often better things than you could have imagined. And the reason I say that, actually, so part of the reason we're doing Tomorrow's Journey, we were in a situation probably 18 months ago where we'd been working on a really large contract and in the box seat to win it, and for whatever reason we didn't, and I was really devastated about it. I was like, oh God, we did everything right. We worked really hard on it, and I think part of the pitch process, I think I'd recorded 600 hours on the project.
Wow.
And we didn't get it, and I was like, oh my God, this is a real a huge professional blow.
Yeah.
But actually what that meant was I went, sold this for a game of cards, what's going on in the marketplace actually, and then ultimately we set up Tomorrow's Journey. If we'd won that contract, I'd be there slaving to deliver that contract now.
And we
wouldn't be here on the podcast, and we wouldn't be doing Tomorrow's Journey, and we wouldn't be doing this other exciting stuff. So I guess it's just that thing of you kind of never know what's around the corner, and even if the worst thing happens, whether it's a business thing, I guess a private thing as well, it kind of is fine, as long as you don't let it distract you from what you're doing, let it affect you. If you kind of pick your head up and go, okay, well, what's next? Sometimes that can be even better than the thing that you wanted in the first place.
I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you. I think it's on point. We're our business as well as others within the STC have partnered up with a local sort of school project to go into the local tech colleges, and so I'm going to be going in to give a talk similar to your point, to say actually what happens after the disappointment is what will define you, whether it be exam failure, whether it be potentially not winning the contract or winning the bit of business. How you then react to that will be the thing that defines you, and for you, Tomorrow's Journey is that which is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely, and to think of how disappointed I was at the time, but then to think about, well, if I had have got the result that I wanted at that point, I probably wouldn't be here doing this thing, which is way better than that thing anyway. So it's a real
there it is.
And it's super important thing to remember.
Sage advice, thank you. Chris, I've kept you for long enough. 36 minutes, the recorder's saying. So I said 30 minutes, 36. So thanks for coming on. I think that's been awesome. Really enjoyed that. Look forward to having Luke on, so we'll have a natter, talk about you as well. I'm
careful not to say anything bad about him. So hopefully he'll be nice about me.
I'm sure he will. But as I said earlier, I definitely want to get you back on. Fascinated to find out what's going on in a year's time, and I'm sure our listeners and other businesses on site would be interested. And also within the show notes, if there's any links you want to give me or can give me, so people can either sort of learn a little bit more about Tomorrow's Journey and sort of reach out and connect with you, potentially for commercial reasons or otherwise. If that's okay, I'll add those.
Absolutely, definitely.
Cool, Chris, thank you for your time.
Thank you, that's great, brilliant, thanks very much.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.